All right, good morning. Good morning. Saturday. How do we make money on Saturday? That's why I got you guys here to help navigate everything. Clayton, what's up? JMart. I know we weren't here last week, so school kind of got in the way of that, but it's all good. Appreciate you guys being here. So let's just get right to it. Ohio State's playing Penn State, and it's at noon. So first game on the board, best game on the board. Clayton, both teams are undefeated, right? But no, Ohio State lost to Oregon.
Mm.
Yeah, Ohio State lost to Oregon. Penn State's undefeated. So Penn State, Ohio State, go. Floor is yours. Set the stage. How do you see it playing out?
Yeah, so you got two teams with really strong run games, two teams with strong defenses, and they're also teams that have kind of been struggling offensively in recent games. So because of that, already I'm expecting a low-scoring game. I think that's kind of typical in the Big Ten. I was going to say for Ohio State, Penn State, but I think past years it's been decently high-scoring. But while both teams have had their struggles, I think Ohio State kind of has the edge for a couple reasons. One, Drew Aller, he's coming off an injury. I'm not sure if he's 100%, if he's even going to play. But even if he does play, he won't be at full health. And when they're already kind of struggling to throw the ball, that makes me less confident in that. And then Ohio State last week, I think, raised a lot of heads with their performance, but I don't think it was more so on the players. I think it was more so in the play calling. They were passing the ball really well first half. Will Howard was super efficient. And then for some reason, they started to run the ball in the second half. It wasn't really working. So I think if they stick with what's working in this game, they should be able to win just because of the holes on Penn State's side. Plus, Penn State, I mean, they generally don't do this, but they haven't really blown anyone out. They're not beating these teams that I think they should be beaten by a lot. So I think Ohio State has the edge.
Games in Penn State. I always get nervous about taking the road team at Penn State. J-Mart, what do you think? Clayton doesn't have any faith here in the Nittany Lions. What about you?
I would lean towards Penn State simply because it is at home for them. I think that's a huge factor that you got to understand. Like, it's a big deal going into Penn State and like trying to get a win, especially with an Ohio State team that does have the talent but hasn't been producing at the level they should be. I think Kyle Aller being hurt or Drew Aller being hurt is a big factor. But at the same time, they have a really solid run game that can work pretty well. I will say, I think it's going to be probably a pretty boring game to watch. They're not going to score a lot. I wouldn't be shocked if both teams score under 20 this game, especially with, like Clayton said, the way the offenses have looked. But I do lean Penn State because it is a home game and because these are the kind of games that Ohio State has traditionally lost under Ryan Day. These are the kind of games where you look at it as a must win. They typically lose those in the Ryan Day era. Wouldn't be shocked if that happens again today.
What about big picture, Clayton? If Ohio State does lose, that gives them 2 losses. If they then win out, they get to beat Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, Ohio State, and then Michigan at the end. They still get to make the playoffs, right? So it's not a must-win for Ohio State. Is that a fair way to say it?
It's not, but you have to then assume that they would win the Big Ten championship. And I think they are likely to if they make it there. I think if they met Oregon at a neutral site, they would have a good chance at beating them. But just because even that's a question mark, I wouldn't be confident that they make the playoff even if they win this game.
So that's you mean if they so the logic going in is it just is more of a sense of urgency for Ohio State in this game?
Yeah, I would say so. Penn State can definitely still sneak in if they lose. Sorry if I misinterpreted that question.
No, you're good, bro. Because basically where we're at with Penn State is they have the softest schedule. I remember going into the season, everybody had Penn State making the playoffs because essentially this was they don't have to play Michigan, they don't have to play Oregon. They get Washington at home, they get Purdue, they get Minnesota, they get Maryland. So they lose today. It doesn't really matter. They can still get in. I can't figure out the playoffs. I don't even know why I'm trying to figure out 5 weeks in advance. But like I'm always trying to find when I'm betting on the NFL the sense of like, the right time, the right matchup. And with college football, it used to be every team has to win every game. It's not like that. And I guess both teams can afford to lose. Both teams don't want to lose. So I don't really know if one team has more of a sense of urgency. Talk to me about how these quarterbacks are going to match up. You're saying, JMart, this Drew Aller guy could be banged up, but for you, it wasn't going to really, affect your decision. Is that because Penn State's going to run the ball on them? Because Ohio State's defense, when I watched them against Oregon, lots of holes. Oregon was able to run the football against them. Is that what you think is going to happen today?
Yeah, exactly. It's that their run defense hasn't been as good as it should be. And I have a hard time just believing that they figure it out on the road in Penn State. It just becomes difficult. And then the second option, which is always a variable, is what if Drew Aller is just a little healthier than we think? And they're just playing it down going into the game. This is stuff we see teams do a lot, is playing up an injury to make it seem like they're going to play a specific kind of football when they can just go and mix it up again. Drew Aller's a complete wild card, and then you go to the other side. Will Howard, been in college for a while. They know what they're going to get when they're playing against Will Howard. They kind of know how to prepare for it, and Penn State has looked just so good defensively. I watched them tear apart Illinois. That pass rush is elite. I think Will Howard will get uncomfortable. They forced interceptions at a pretty high rate. I kind of expect to see Penn State just get Ohio State on the back foot, and then once Ohio State's down by a little bit, they don't play as well. This has always been a problem. I can see that happening again today.
So to finish it up, Clayton, you said that it was more on the play calling against Nebraska. Could there be some logic that they felt like the game was in hand, and they wanted to see some things, right? And then I guess what you're saying is they're just bigger, stronger than Penn State. Like how you said it's gonna be low scoring. Is Ohio State just gonna pound the ball and do to Penn State what Penn State wishes they could do Ohio State?
I think Ohio State has the advantage through the air on offense, especially given how their run game looked last game against Nebraska. But like you were saying, that definitely could be like they were just chilling out, didn't want to reveal the whole playbook in that second half. But it was still too close for comfort for them to be doing that, in my opinion. But yeah, I think like Jack was saying, Penn State probably has the advantage on the run game because of how Ohio State's played in recent games. But I think they'll also be preparing for Penn State to run the ball a lot, given Drew Aller's injury. Then again, you have to consider maybe they're playing it down. But I just think Ohio State has the edge given they know what they're going to be preparing for.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with Penn State last week because they went to USC 2 weeks prior. So you figured, man, that's a lot of travel. And then they went home. Then they went to Wisconsin last week, kicked their ass. Now they're coming back. It's a lot for Penn State. They played 2 road games. USC's not having a giant – I think there's probably more Penn State fans at USC's game than actual USC fans. But regardless, it's a long travel. Then they went to Wisconsin. Should be a great game. Look forward to it. I'm not sure this afternoon's game is going to be the greatest game in the world. Georgia, Florida is always it's always entertaining for lots of different reasons. So, JMart, we have a better chance of Georgia winning by 40, or are you sweating it out in the fourth quarter and yelling at Carson Beck?
If Georgia has done a really good job of just handling business in this game when they're the better team in recent history, outside of, I think, 2020 when Florida just had a great team, Georgia has just looked dominant against Florida. I think I expect that to happen again today. The one wrinkle is that DJ Lagway can run the ball really well, Florida's quarterback. And I do think that could mess with Georgia a little bit. Georgia's been notoriously poor at containing dual threat quarterbacks. That could be a wrinkle, but I don't think Lagway is efficient enough as a quarterback to really make that matter. And I do just think we just watched Georgia dominate Texas, especially on defense. I don't expect that to stop just because it's a Florida team and not Texas. I think it'll still be one of those where Florida's just going to have a really hard time finding points.
What do you see, Clayton? You see it the same way, or you think Florida's going to pull off a miracle?
Yeah, I think Georgia looked really dominant against Texas, and that's with Carson Beck throwing 3 interceptions. So if Georgia can smooth out that offense, eliminate the turnovers, get the ball going through the air like it was against Mississippi State, which I think they definitely have the potential to do in this game, they can beat whoever. And they're my national championship favorite now because of that. They just look really dominant. The defense is coming together. I don't think Florida can hang with them. Like Jack said, Lagway can run, but the way their defense looked against Texas, I just don't expect it to be close. I think UGA will win this one pretty easily.
Where's Napier at? Florida's kind of turned it around a little bit, but he set the expectations so low because it was terrible. If they get blown out, is he back on the hot seat, Florida's head coach?
I think he probably is. I don't think he ever left it that much. He's a good recruiter, so you have to give him that. But it'll just be hard to see what they do. They're playing such a tough schedule throughout these last few games that even if they were to lose all those games, I think he could keep his job if he kept them decently close.
So the rest of the slate, there's always these tricky games where it's like Indiana's at Michigan State, but Indiana's only favored by 8. Feels like a little too easy. Oregon's at Michigan. Michigan can't score, but who knows? That just seems like a strange spot. Tennessee gets Kentucky at home. But I know at least what we got? Ole Miss is at Arkansas. That should be interesting. So there's a handful of games today. There's always be entertaining games. But the last game we're going to discuss, Clayton, you are hopefully you make it back to wherever you're supposed to be by the end of the night. But you get a night game at home because Texas A&M all of a sudden is good at football. Like before we knew it, Texas A&M, they won 7 straight. They beat LSU. They were getting – what was the score in that game? Weren't they down by a couple touchdowns and then they beat them by a couple touchdowns? So set the stage for me, Clayton. How does South Carolina pull it off? Do they have a chance? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think everyone's kind of – all the general fans are kind of coming in expecting Texas A&M to win just because of how good they've looked this year. They're running the ball super well, playing great on defense statistically. So I think it's a lot of what South Carolina has to do to prepare. But I think South Carolina defensively matches up well against what Texas A&M does on offense. When Marcel came in the game, it was primarily run plays as you would expect. He runs the option really well, makes really good reads for a freshman. But I think South Carolina's defensive line has a good chance at shutting that down. I think if they can control the run game, Marcel Reed showed he can make some downfield throws too, but Texas A&M as a passing offense hasn't been that great. So I do expect it to be pretty close. Then again, Texas A&M has been really good on defense. South Carolina has not looked good on offense. Even in that game against Oklahoma, which looks really dominant for South Carolina when you're looking at the box score, it was purely defensive. The offense did not look great at all. Play calling was very one-dimensional. So if South Carolina can't step it up on offense, I don't think they can win, but I think it'll be low scoring and close just because South Carolina's defense matches up really well for what Texas A&M brings to the table.
JMart, the spread's only 3, so they're making it easy for you to take Texas A&M. As some people would say, professional gamblers would love to take would love at South Carolina in this spot because, the general fan, the average person sees the number 10 team in the country. They're only favored by 3 points. Clayton gave us the reasons why he thinks it could be tight. What do you think? How do you see it playing out?
I think A&M's substantially better. I think with South Carolina, you look at a team that has the ability to hang with anyone, but has a real issue of just not winning the games they're staying in. LSU, Alabama, these are games they blew that they can't be blowing. This is stuff when you're in a game against a top 10 team, and you're winning, you got to hold it down. They haven't done that well. A&M top 10 team, strong defense. In my opinion, an underrated offense, especially with Marcel Reed as the quarterback. I think that South Carolina will make some good plays. They always will. They have a great defense, but at the end of the day, they got to find a way to score too. Mike Elko has that Texas A&M defense pretty impenetrable right now. I think it'll be low scoring for South Carolina, but I do see a world where A&M's able to eke out like 25 to 30 points.
What is the college? What is going on with A&M's coaching? Why is it so much better? What you said the defense is impenetrable. Is it because it's just athletes, or is it such a big difference in the coaching since the last regime?
So one thing Jimbo Fisher did a great job of at A&M was recruiting. He got a lot of talent into the roster. He just never figured out how to use it. With Elko, he's a guy that comes from Duke and was able to do a lot with a little. He didn't get the same recruits that Jimbo has. Now he has a plethora of talent and is able to use it to his advantage, and has just been amazing at running that defense. It has looked really good. I'd argue it's a top 3 defense in college football right now. So the problem is you run out Lenore Sellers. You're asking a lot of him to try and figure the defense out, and it's a defense that really good quarterbacks have had a really hard time doing anything with. Nussmeier threw like 3 interceptions last week.
So Clayton, you're winning only if it's like 17-14 basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe you could see a little more than that, maybe in the 20s for each team. South Carolina did show that they can do some stuff on offense. They've had some explosive plays in those LSU and Alabama games, but like Jack was saying, the Texas A&M defense looks really good this year, so it's going to be harder to do that against this team than those previous ones.
And A&M, the way they're set up, like, yeah, I don't know why I decided like today would be a good idea to talk about like the playoffs because there's so many games. I mean, there's so much that can happen. So yeah, A&M doesn't have to win this game, but they certainly are going to have a sense of urgency. And like deep down, if I'm coaching South Carolina, we can still make the playoffs. So like it's all changed now that there's 12 teams in there. It's like, hey, if we win out, we're going to make the playoffs. So whether or not anybody else thinks that, the guys in the locker room can think that. It should be a great game. Hope you have fun going to the game, Clayton. All right, let's get out of here with the prop bets. Not jinxing anything. Let's just roll, Clayton. No pressure, but let's keep it moving. What's the first one?
Yeah, I'm taking Carson Beck over 275.5 passing yards. Like I said, I think Georgia will come out of the gate hot in this one. As Jack was saying, they have dominated this game in recent years, and I think they'll do the same thing. So I think that's a really reasonable line. You see what he did to Mississippi State. I think he can do a similar thing against Florida.
Yeah, so Georgia's quarterback, Carson Beck, over 275 and
275.5. Yep.
Cool. Sweet. What's your first one, JMart?
I have Luke Altmaier, Illinois quarterback, over 202.5 passing yards against Minnesota. He's just had 2 back-to-back weeks playing really good defenses in Michigan and Oregon. I think going to Minnesota, who isn't a bad defensive team, it's still a Big Ten program. They're going to have a good defense, but I know he's just itching to throw the ball. He wants to be able to finally play the offense he enjoys playing, and it's a good matchup for him because he has threats. Minnesota's been comparably somewhat weak at defending good passing quarterbacks. I expect a bounce-back game back in the 200s for sure from him.
All right, 2 quarterbacks for the first. What do you got, Clayton? Next one.
So I'm taking the Penn State tight end, Tyler Warren. I'm taking under 54.5 receiving yards. It seems pretty high for him against Ohio State. Like I said, I don't think Penn State's passing game is going to be that strong, especially with Drew Aller's injury. So this is also –
Is that the best tight end in the country? His over-under is 54.5 receiving yards?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it's largely skewed by a couple performances. The 224-yard one against USC, and then he had about 150 or something like that against Bowling Green. So he's had those really good games, but against all other opponents, he's had no more than 50. And I think Ohio State will be prepared for him just because he seems to be just one of the key offensive weapons for them outside of the run game.
I like it. So what's his name again?
Tyler Warren.
And okay, here we go. Learning things on the fly. All right, shoot me over the next one, JMart.
I have Ollie Gordon over 59.5 rushing yards against Arizona State.
That's it? 59.5?
That's the thing is he's had such a rough year that the line's been lowered substantially.
Wow.
Past 2 weeks, we've seen him at, I believe it was 78 and over 100. So he's showing that he's kind of starting to figure it out a little bit. And I think because Oklahoma State just hasn't been very good this year, defenses are more willing to kind of let him run a little more and force them to beat him in the air a little bit. 59.5 is just too low for a guy like him. Arizona State isn't anything special defending the run. They're a solid team, but either they aren't one of those – they're not like a BYU where you have to actually think like he probably doesn't have a shot here. I just think 59.5 for Ollie Gordon just feels disrespectful. It just feels too low. I think he can cover that. He's good enough to cover in a half, so I like the value there.
If you're paying attention, whether it's the two of you or anybody listening, like college football prop bets, if you're able to bet them, basketball prop bets, baseball prop bets, like the sports books don't get enough action on them. They will limit your betting. Like you can't bet $1 million on those bets. But if you have a good opinion on things, that's usually the best way to get the edge. Everything else, most of these games, like that freaking Texans-Jets game is like 50-50. And it's like a lot of these games are. But what you can do is if you have an opinion, like Penn State's offense is going to suck, especially their quarterback is going to struggle, then you target the under for their top receiver. And that makes sense. And if you feel like there's a running back that's undervalued, because a lot of times they're doing it just not a lot of times, almost every time, it's just based on the numbers, right? They see the statistics. They don't have time to put the band, it's anyway, the sports books are going to put out the numbers based on how many games, the average, and kind of just leave it at that. So if you're watching, if you have an edge, I suggest going that route. What am I doing? I got to do baseball. I don't know what I'm doing now. Dodgers beat the Yankees, so I guess I'll just have college football all day. So I'll enjoy that. I'll be here in the morning to do the NFL. Good luck. We'll have all the bets out. I didn't mean to cut you guys off. You each had 2 of them, right? 2 prop bets each?
Yeah, just 2.
I have one more.
One more?
Yeah.
I might have one. Go.
It's really related to Clayton's. It's Arian Smith over 25.5 longest reception. Anyone that knows the Georgia offense or has been listening has listened to me talk about Arian Smith's a great deep threat. He's a little boomer bust this year, but a little less than he has been in the past. I think they're going to come out, just try and bomb one on Florida pretty consistently this game just to demoralize them. One thing you want to do, especially at a neutral site game, is get the underdog feeling like they are the underdog and don't let them think they're in the game. Arian Smith's the key to doing that for Georgia. Carson Beck's probably going to throw a lot. I think one of them goes to Arian Smith for 30 to 40 yards.
Sweet. Appreciate that. Appreciate you guys. See everybody in the morning. Have a good day. Clayton, enjoy the game. See you guys. JMart, I'll see you on Tuesday, man.
All right, see you.
See ya.